bears, moles, and the enduring debate about whether it's tougher to be gay or Christian in America. We've got all that and more coming up, so stay tuned.
You're tuning into the destination for TV superfan discussion, AfterBuzz TV. And now, let the buzz begin.
From heaven above with wisdom, Phil Svitek.
Hello, I am polyamorous.
Polyamorous, it's very brave of you. I'm microdosing my cereal. It's very brave of me.
You are, no, what do they say?
A pioneer.
Yes.
I'm a pioneer. Ladies and gentlemen, I am a damn pioneer, and my name is Jeff. And this is the Silicon Valley After Show here on AfterBuzz TV. Of course, we're in the middle of Season 5. This is Episode 4, Phil.
Absolutely.
Along.
I am Phil Svitek, and I'm glad to say that we have cut all the Christians off from the rest of this panel.
Yes, except, guys, I do identify as Christian. Very controversial. Phil knows that.
What?
I know. Am I allowed to stay? You know, it's interesting. I actually feel like it's safer to be a Christian in Los Angeles than in Silicon Valley.
Not entirely true.
See, I feel like LA, though, kind of has this culture of, like, if you worship crystals, that's fine. If you worship tea leaves, if you worship the stars, you can kind of just do whatever you want. And
Well, we'll talk about it.
We'll talk about it. That's right, guys. Today on the Silicon Valley After Show, we have a lot to talk about. Of course, we have our episode, which did cover, very controversially, the topics of Christianity and homosexuality. But we also have some great segments, including Silicon Valley in real life. And Phil, we have a bombshell of a news story today.
Yeah, you could say that.
Yeah, so that's your tease, and it's, I will say we got some juicy news today related to our very own TJ Miller, so you're going to want to stay tuned for that. But I say we get into overall thoughts right now. Phil, how did you feel about Season 5, Episode 4 of Silicon Valley, called Tech Evangelist?
We returned to form. If you guys listened last week, you guys know it wasn't my favorite episode. This one, we're back on it, and I appreciate the fact that the hunt for the mole wasn't a long, drawn-out thing. It was just very quick, and now we're having fun with it. There's new business to attend to, so we'll see.
Yeah, I thought it was a pretty good episode, too. I gotta say, I appreciated the subversion of our expectations with this A-plot, the Christianity versus homosexuality, and then but there was a really, really smart turn with all these tech nerds at the end where this kind of dichotomy was pushed even further. A trichotomy, is that a word? So I'm excited to get into it. I also do want to quickly say we're missing a Christian and a Nate this week. Fellas, we miss you, but they're sick. Come on, guys.
Because they're Christians.
Because they're Christian.
Christian is a Christian who is sick and infected.
Yes.
Nate with his Christianity, hence he is no longer welcome.
I would be surprised to hear that Nate endorses the teachings of Jesus Christ, but I don't know. I've never asked him. Nate, you can tell us next week. Let's go ahead and get into our coverage, though. I think the topics I want to cover today are first, this whole Christianity versus homosexuality versus tech worship is what I'm going to call our A story. Our B story is, of course, the question of who actually owns the 10% of Pied Piper that we've been talking about all season. We have our C plot, which is the bear is sticky from honey, and then we have some leftovers. But let's go ahead and start with this A plot, which is the religious story. Silicon Valley takes on religion. Phil, how did you feel about this subplot specifically?
I appreciated it from a very basic standpoint that, as Richard kind of, we always get into this pattern where we want to better the world. That was the phrase for a number of seasons, and now it's we want to create an all-inclusive new internet and so forth. And what I love, what we're satirizing, is the idea of people being all-inclusive and yet being quite the opposite.
I agree with you, Phil. We've been doing themes for each of these episodes. We said pettiness, we said sneakiness. I'd say inclusivity versus exclusivity might be the theme of this episode. I think it's a really sharp observation on your part. Let's start with the Octopipers. Okay. So the very first thing we see is that Phil, see, he's our very own Richard, you guys. I don't know if you guys knew this, but Phil is our CCO of AfterBuzz?
I would be, well...
CTO?
COO.
COO. I should know that because I work for him. But Richard has these 8 potential new partners with the new internet that he's launching. He's calling them the Octopipers, which doesn't necessarily fly with the rest of the characters in the show. But basically, these are the first companies that he wants to launch this new internet with. And importantly, one of the characters in this group is a gay CEO who is launching a exclusively gay dating platform. Now, I think what was interesting was at first we thought that this whole exclusivity theme was going to be about the fact that the only people on the app were gay. Is that kind of where you saw this going before the turn was introduced?
A little bit. I mean, it was obviously very early on, and if you kind of look at it, this is the second episode in a row where, or sorry, not in a row, but certainly within the season where Richard's inclusiveness has come into question. The first one's being Asians.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I hope he's not a nativist. Okay, so everything seems fine until we go to K-Hole, which is this independent gaming company, kind of similar to maybe like a Blizzard Entertainment. I don't know. I'm not a huge gamer, but maybe for you guys in the comments, let us know what you think the analog to this company might be. First thing I got to say, I enjoyed the elements of overly violent video game satire that we saw when they first walked into the office. That's pretty funny.
Absolutely, and the fact that everyone's playing it kind of has that very gaming culture. You know, it's when you talk about that a gay dating app is a subset of dating apps. Well, I think when you talk about gamers and specifically game development, it's a subset of the Silicon Valley culture and programmers. So I appreciate that. If you're a gamer, I'm not too big of a gamer, but I got enough of it where I could laugh.
Yeah, I did like the moment where we see a very, very violent death with innards splaying all over the screen, and Richard goes, "Oh, that won't be an open casket funeral." That's pretty funny. But of course, the importance of this moment was K-Hole is, of course, a large independent gaming company, and they're interested in potentially partnering with Richard's new Pied Piper Internet, owing to a funny connection through Lori Bream that I want to save for our last section. But Richard outs this gay CEO as a Christian, and of course, that's the moment that's so controversial.
Well, I don't know exactly where you're going with the Lori thing, but in particular, for me, one of the things that she says is, "Oh, smart strategy, so you talk less."
Yeah.
And if only he had stuck to that strategy.
You're right.
You know, I feel it's always this thing where Richard, the irony is he feels like somehow he can and knows how to talk to the VCs of the world, the CEOs. And because specifically I'm pointing out when we had the whole restructure and he couldn't talk to his coders. You would think the one set of people that he could talk to is developers, right? And yet it's not. And so here he feels the need to just talk on and on and on and feels like he knows exactly what to say. And yet he doesn't. He should have just stuck to the strategy and talk less.
He should have stuck to the script. So, of course, he outs this CEO as a Christian, and this the CEO of this video game company, played very well by... Oh, I just looked up.
Neil.
By Neil Casey, that's right, who's a UCB guy I've liked for a long time. This is the line that you don't cross in Silicon Valley. Anyone who actually believes in the teachings of Jesus Christ is crazy. They're delusional. They're repugnant, according to this. And we have this really, really, I think, funny and smart conversation about how it's fine for him to be gay. As we mentioned, polyamory is fine, whatever, but you cannot be a Christian in the Valley. How did you feel about this turn when we got to it in the episode?
I appreciate it because it is classic Richard not knowing when to stop. You know, in that sense, rather than just he never has the confidence to just let things be, right? And if it's going to be made a point, just deal with it after the fact, as opposed to trying to get ahead of it,
Right.
And saying like, but it's okay, you know, so the app might be gay, he might be gay, everything's all good. You know, he has this weird sense of moral and judgment, and if he just let that go, then everything would be fine.
Yeah, I do want to credit Thomas Middleditch because I think we've seen all these characters grow, and actors. I think the performances and characters have grown. Obviously, we're 5 seasons into a comedy show. That should be happening, but I mentioned it before on the after show, but Richard has become a very sharply physical performer. I think if you watch, obviously, we know it's a good performance, but there's a lot of subtleties and details that I think are making this performance really excellent, including just all these weird twitches. And there was one moment when he was scratching the back of his ear this episode, and that just represents examples of really, really smart, deliberate choices as an actor that I think are really elevating his performance. So I do think he's playing the sort of neurotic, socially awkward coder in a smarter and more specific way every time we see him on this show.
Yeah. What I appreciated was the dichotomy that's fully brought out later of, wait, my dad wants his gay son back.
Yeah, I know. I thought that was so smart. He's like, yeah, I mean, my dad won't even talk to me anymore, and all he wants is his gay son back. I thought this was such sharp writing and just interesting. I think Mike Judge has always not only been interested in satirizing the culture of tech and corporate America, but also I think sometimes overly progressive woke America. I think like Mike Judge is interested in sometimes cutting down folks who believe that their ideology is on the precipice of progressiveness, but is actually sometimes pretty backwards.
Absolutely. And in a weird way, Richard is kind of like a surrogate for the audience because he's so clueless about the world. And you know, the fact that Palo Alto is all about non-Christianity.
Right.
So it works on that level as well.
So I was reading some interesting coverage from AV Club today that was mentioning they thought this was handled with too light a touch. Like the writers were afraid to kind of really dig in and offer a tangible point about Christianity. I don't feel that way, but I'm wondering if you see any validity in that critique.
Well, I just don't understand what the point would be.
Right.
Other than the fact of this whole idea of inclusivity only works insofar as an idea, but if all of a sudden something comes in opposition of my world belief and affects me more directly, then we have a problem.
Right.
And how do you hold up that whole, yay, we're all inclusive mentality? You can't.
Yeah, I think the thing I liked about this subplot was I think people will see whatever they want to see. People will project their own worldview on the characters. I think like people who are vehemently anti-Christian will agree with these coders and say, yeah, like that is a backwards worldview. Whereas I think Christians will probably watch this subplot and think, yeah, we are persecuted. You know, I think like if they would have gone into too many specifics, Mike Judge would have been losing out on the identifiability of this subplot for whatever group is watching it.
Yeah, I mean, it had enough humor as far as like Richard trying to be, again, all inclusive, and yet the way he's going about it in that second round of meeting of, you know, so what if his beliefs are wrong, or we like, I forget all the actual terminology, but the fact that he was just so insulting,
Vile and repugnant, I think is what he said.
yeah, and the fact that then that just launched a whole debate about robots versus non-robots and this and that, and just evolved into just this absolute thing, and yet it just proved that they're okay with it. At the end of the day, it's just do your work type of thing.
Well, and that's what was so smart to me was this final turn where, yeah, Richard mentions the backward mentality of subscribing to a higher power, and then all of these tech nerds are talking about how they will one day be enslaved by artificial intelligence. And I just thought it was such an interesting turn that these nihilistic atheists are still, in a sense, bowing down to a different form of, like, idol worship. And that's AI, or, you know, I just thought we saw this arguably spiritual debate happen immediately after they discredited the validity of spirituality.
The only thing missing from that scene was Guilfoyle with his satanism, but it's satanism with a hint of something tendencies.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. It's such a hilariously specific detail, but yeah, it would have been fun to see Guilfoyle offer his worldview there. But I mean, at the end of the day, everyone has a spiritual worldview. It just is a matter of where you land, you know?
Yeah, I think what they're really talking about is this idea that it's just so taboo.
Yeah.
And, you know, in order to be at peace with each other, we all just have to kind of shut our mouths and not say anything.
Yeah.
And in essence, it's whatever the trend is, right? So in this sense, like, oh, not only is gay okay, it's better, as Monica points out.
Right.
That works in our favor.
Oh, yeah, that was what was great. She's like, no, push that. Just pull back on the other stuff. Yeah, I thought that was really funny. And I'd be curious to hear what you guys think in the comments. I mean, I think this is the first time the show's kind of taken around religion. You could argue it's a controversial topic, but I think the show handled it with a pretty light touch.
I'd say the show's taken on Christianity multiple times through Guilfoyle.
Yeah, that's true. But I don't feel like it's ever identified another side. Like, I don't feel like the show's ever taken a stance, really.
Okay.
I don't even know if it did this episode either, but...
Yeah, I don't think it did. I think it just presented it well, and you decide how you want to ultimately view it.
Right.
But I don't think at any point it says don't believe in Christianity.
I didn't feel that way either. But I'd be curious to hear what you guys think in the comments. Do you think the show should have gone in harder? Do you think the show's light touch was the right one? And ultimately, did you enjoy this subplot? Because I think ultimately it was a much more philosophical, much plot-driven sort of story than sometimes we see on this show, especially for such a plot-driven comedy. So I enjoyed it. I thought it was interesting. And at the end of the day, I thought it was pretty smart.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly.
Well, let's go ahead and move on to something more directly narrative related, and that's, of course, this 10% ownership in Pied Piper question. That's kind of been on the back burner all season with Jin Yang. Of course, Jin Yang, as who he thinks to be the 10% owner, has been harassing Richard with these phone calls. Did you think this was funny, that Jin Yang keeps calling Richard and leaving voicemails?
I actually do. I thought it was very funny. It's so within his character. And one of the funnier lines of all this was Jared in opposition of Jin Yang and saying, you can't just glom on to other stuff and call it new.
Right.
You building new internet.
Yeah, that was funny. I will say, though, I know Nate has kind of fallen off the Jin Yang train, but the rest of us have sort of been on board. I'm starting to lose my footing. I'm feeling like Jin Yang's becoming a little one note.
Okay, yeah, but he's not overused. And I think in this sense, they were pushing him a lot harder. If this was wrestling, he'd be the bad character, the heel of the show.
Yeah. And
so, in that sense, you're not supposed to like him.
Right.
He kicked them out of the house. And while it was initially funny of like, okay, Erlich, blah, 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 now he's gone the complete opposite route. And I don't think we're going to see him much, just based on the way the episode ended.
Right.
But we had to get to that point where they would just be absolutely not even frustrated, but just I'm trying to find not frustrated, not upset, but like whatever term for anger and hatred that you can quantify to the nth degree.
Right. I think it wasn't so much the one-dimensionality of the character, but honestly just like I feel like he's being over-directed to be so like Asian. I want to tread lightly here, but there's a sense in which I almost feel like we got versions of Jin Yang that felt a little rounder in previous seasons. And I almost feels like the joke, like the humor we're supposed to be getting out of Jin Yang is like how he mispronounces words. And something about the way he was directed this episode kind of rubbed me the wrong way. I don't know, but that might just be me.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, his English certainly has not improved much.
Right.
You'd have to kind of track the scales, but in terms of him ever coming close to a semblance of any fluentness,
right?
That he's not come close yet. So I could see your point.
Well, I'd be curious to hear what you guys think in the comments, because I know that's sort of been in the internet. That's how techie I am. But I know that debate's kind of been existing around on different message boards and coverage sites. So I'd be curious to hear what you guys think. But importantly, we learned that Jin Yang probably isn't the 10% owner in the company he thought he was, because Bighead is still technically partnered with Bachman and Insanity from season 3? Season 4?
Yep, season 3.
Because he thought he dissolved the company, but instead he mailed a menu for Mr. Chow's. How did you feel about the return of Nelson Bighetti?
I thought it was very well done.
Yeah.
We start off with a nice lighthearted joke of like, oh, just like your name. Nelson.
Nelson.
Which makes no sense whatsoever.
This was so funny.
And of course, it just sort of his incompetence works in his favor.
Yeah. He fails upwards, like no matter how, the dumber he gets, the more he succeeds, which is a very Mike Judgey trope. But yeah, it was so nice to see Josh Brener again. I just think like, not only is he a well-written character, but he just brings such a goofy dumbness to the role that I never get tired of.
Yeah, and we don't spend too much time on it, simply for the fact that there's so much other stuff going on. Mm-hmm. Like you would normally think, oh, okay, as far as their friendship is concerned, the way last season ended, the way just him and Richard's friendship has gone this entire series, that it would be a good moment of like, oh, okay, you're finally back in the company, you got 10%, we're good, everything worked out, like let bygones be bygones. And yet it's just so overshadowed with everything else that's going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely a busy season. So ultimately, we don't know what the fate of Bighead's connection to Pied Piper is going to be, but that seed was planted, I thought, in a very funny and efficient way. Most importantly, though, the very last thing we see in this episode is that Jin Yang is no longer in the States. he presumably has left for China to launch his own new internet, borrowing from Richard's code. How did you feel about this twist at the end of the episode?
Seems very Jin Yang. He does have a corrupt uncle
Yeah.
in China.
Yeah.
So it works in that regard. I mean, just based off of the way it was set up last week, I don't know if this was like where it was headed, but certainly it's no surprise that he was going to steal something and be corrupt about it.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Well, we don't necessarily know who exactly has ownership in Pied Piper right now, but I do know who has ownership in AfterBuzz TV, and that's our very own CEO, Maria Menounos, famed entertainment journalist who gives us plenty at this network, and she can give something back to you, which is her podcast. Phil, you want to tell me more about that?
Absolutely. If you like to have fun, learn, and grow in all areas of your life, not just Christianity, then this is the podcast for you. Conversations with Maria Menounos is the name of the podcast. It is hosted by our very own founder, Maria, and it drops every Friday on the good old iTunes, as we like to call it here. Conversations with Maria Menounos features celebrity and influencer interviews, along with secrets and tips on how to be better in all aspects of your life, from health and wellness to career, relationships, finances, and more. Let our Maria be the big sister you've always wanted. All you have to go is to iTunes, subscribe to Conversations with Maria Menounos. Just like with this podcast, it is 100% free. In fact, it's 110% free. And if you do so, listen, take a gander, and let her know what you think. Let her know that it was us who sent you there by saying Silicon Valley.
Absolutely. I know a lot of you guys might have an image of Maria as this very polished e-news, red carpet correspondent, which she is. But what's kind of fun
She's a lot more like Richard than you think.
She's more like Richard than you think. And what's fun is for those of you guys who want to tune in, she really shows us who she is on her serious show, and she doesn't have to subscribe to the standards of network. So she's from Boston. She might have a edgier worldview than you would expect. And I was on the show last week, and we talked all about a sex robot. And we got into some very specifics of the psychology of having sex with the robot, which is a very Silicon Valley-esque topic. So there's more for you than you think if you're a fan of Silicon Valley. So you should definitely check out Maria's podcast.
And I'm all going to say Maria's nothing like Richard Hendricks.
Yeah. But I think in terms of the genius and ability to build something, she is. But I'd say she has relatively more social skills than Richard.
Absolutely.
So I do want to talk about this Gavin subplot. I gotta say, did not love this "the bear is sticky with honey" joke. And I'm starting to feel like they're really trying to shoehorn Gavin into this season. How did you feel?
I feel like he's shoehorned in this particular moment. I think there's going to be a lot more for him to do, which I can certainly talk about in predictions. But as far as this, yeah, it might be a stretch, but I thought it was funny enough in terms of what it was trying to say, where just everyone has these catchphrases and these philosophies, and we've seen, in particular, Gavin be so grand and use animals during his board meetings and so forth. And if you go back and rewatch it, it sets up the joke perfectly, because he is, in fact, right before he walks out, using the bear with the honey.
I saw that. Yeah.
So you have to, the first time around, you kind of have to pick it up.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought this was fine. It just kind of reminded me of an example of sometimes in such a plot-driven comedy show, this felt like a reminder to the audience, like, don't forget about Gavin, but, like, how do we make it funny? And I don't know, it almost felt like it was plot at the expense of a joke. Like, they knew they needed to keep us privy to what's happening in the world of Hooli, and they just needed something funny to happen. And I don't know, the payoff didn't really land for me personally, but...
Well, the fact of the matter was, there wasn't a stronger tie-in between the mole and Gavin. Mm-hmm. Part of why they kept on Jeff was the fact that too many J's.
Yeah,
was the fact that otherwise, so they would become suspicious over at Hooli, and therefore, do something drastic or whatever. One can only speculate. So they're keeping him on board,
right?
Which is a whole subplot of itself,
yeah,
of what they're doing with Jeff in terms of Dave and Buster's and
BattleBots.
Right.
I forgot about the Jeff stuff. This is funny to me. I actually like the way this is operating, and I think it's a funny way to be using Dinesh, who I think is a little bit sidelined this season. But I think, like, yeah, I think this is working for me.
Yeah, and I thought there just needs to be a stronger connection because when Gavin says, "I'm going to Jackson Hole, don't bother me for any regard," there was plenty of opportunity to throw something, right? And whether that be false information to the mole that gets back to Hoover, who knows? But we chose the bear is sticky with honey.
Yeah. I will say one of my favorite moments of the season so far is this hard cut to Dinesh singing karaoke right before we break into the credits. I thought that was hilarious. I don't know how you felt about that, but
I thought it was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
Because I'm glad that they figured it out. That's what made it so funny.
Yeah.
To go back to the bear thing, though, I will say, and there is a side to things where you feel like you're very specific with what you say, and yet it makes no sense to other people. Because if you really break it down, the bear is sticky with honey.
Right.
It works. It's 100% true. It's not like he's being vague about it.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah.
And so it's just funny to see the frustration of people like, what do I need to say to you guys? Like I said, the bear is sticky with honey.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm excited to see what happens with Gavin, and we'll get into that in predictions. I did enjoy seeing his dick signature again. That is also a joke that never gets old for me. I just want to talk about some of the leftover stuff we haven't addressed yet. Lori Bream is back, which is great. As you guys know, she's one of my favorite characters on this show.
Stop. Whatever it is you're doing.
Whatever it is you're doing, just stop. She takes acid for postpartum depression, which I thought was a hilarious thing to learn from her. And one thing I will say about this episode, we kind of got everyone. We got Bighead, we got Jin Yang, we got Lori Bream, we got Monica. We get no Russ Henneman, which makes me sad.
No Ron LaFlamme, although he was mentioned by name.
He was mentioned by name, but I was actually talking to a commenter on our video from last week who was saying they miss seeing Lori Bream and Bighead, so they're back. And I do think when you have such a deep bench of these hilarious kind of guest characters, it seems silly not to bring them in. So I was glad to see that they used those characters well.
And can we all just agree and applaud? To be honest, I didn't talk about it in the past episodes, but I was very curious to see who the official tow company of Pied Piper would be. So I'm just ecstatic the fact that we got that resolution.
We got that payoff, man. I've been on bated breath. We finally found out.
Although there is so as far as that's concerned, just a quick little side note. You did interview Zach Woods. He mentioned to you that he could have potentially been a sex worker.
Yes.
And it came to fruition.
That's my next point, Phil. You're on it. Keep going.
It came to fruition this episode because just like a narc or cops, they can't show and do those things to prove that they are actual sex workers.
I have the quote. Look, cutting all ties to Dee Dee and First Strike will definitely send a strong message to Colin. And it might be the only way. Like killing someone to prove you're not a narc, or showing a John your genitals to prove you're a legitimate male prostitute and not an undercover cop. So funny.
Oh, this is the tow truck company. I gotta take this.
Yeah, the way
just no blinking.
Just such a good character. Finally, great callback. Richard knows a lot about gay specificity.
Like a Donald Duck.
Like a Donald Duck. And that's a Russ Henneman callback. Good job, writers. Good job.
And what was his grandfather's name?
Oh, I can't remember.
And it's not beautiful like the Pedro way or something like that.
Let us know in the comments. If you're a real super fan, you know the name of Russ Henneman's gay uncle.
No, grandfather.
Grandfather. See, look at me. Kick me off this
grandfather.
Panel, guys. It's beautiful, though. It's really, really beautiful. Let's talk about anything else before we move on to some of our segments.
Well, overall, I think we talked about it. I mean, there's just so much beauty to this episode, but as far as the big stuff, we got it.
I think we got it. Anything we're missing, of course, continue the conversation with us. In fact, let's talk about the conversation you can continue with us, guys, because if you're watching us on YouTube right now, you might not know we have a podcast on iTunes. If you're listening in your car on the way to work or to get groceries or whatever you may be doing, we have a YouTube. So it's sort of fun to consume the show in both ways. You get different experiences by doing either way. But most importantly, if you're watching on YouTube right now, go ahead and hit that like button for us. It helps you more than you know. As you guys can see, I'm always in the comments of our YouTube videos, so I'll engage with you there. And if you're on iTunes, go ahead and throw us that 5-star rating. Just so you guys know, iTunes uses an algorithm that will upvote our show if you are rating it. So super helpful if you guys could do that for us, because we bring you this content for free. It's the least you can do, but for real, it's helpful and we'd appreciate it. Also, we're on Twitter, so you can connect with us there. We'd love to continue the conversation.
Absolutely.
With that being said, I say we get into our Silicon Valley in real life segment. To remind you guys, this is a moment of the show where I will present 3 stories about real life Silicon Valley, but only one of them is true.
All right. Well, usually this is a lot more fun for me because I have other people to contend with.
Yes.
So this is all on me this week.
You'll just have to think out loud.
All
so
right.
we're going with patent-related stories this week. So I have 3 major patents that huge tech companies have filed. First, we have Apple. Apple has patented the eggshell white Svitek design, which is common to its iPods, so that no other company can borrow the design. And the article I read was specific to note that the patent only holds if the color is eggshell white. Another story that may or may not be true is that Google has patented an adhesive flypaper to its self-driving cars on the hood, so that if these cars strike pedestrians, the pedestrians will stick to the hood of the car. And the third story I have is about Hewlett-Packard, and that's that Hewlett-Packard has applied for an exclusivity patent on sex toys for its 3D printers in hopes that they can monopolize the market. When asked about it, HP CEO Dion Weisler offered, "Come on, it's tech nerds who are going to be buying these printers, so those assets will be in high demand, and we're trying to corner the market on sex toys."
Okay, the third one is false. I would have believed you because, no offense, remember, I mean, Pied Piper has taught us that the sex industry drives a lot of innovation. So up until the nerds, I would have believed you on that one.
Okay.
So you gave yourself away there.
Fair enough.
You know what? I'm going to go with number 2, the car stickiness to be true. You know what? It just feels right for this episode where the bear is sticky with honey, so the car is sticky with people. Let's go with that one as true.
Ladies and gentlemen, Phil Svitek is correct. I actually have a photo. Jules, do you want to pull up the diagram for the flypaper adhesive?
It just felt like if we're trying to save lives, people have done it in much more absurd ways, so why not?
Well, Phil, very good. You got it right this week. So just so you guys know, Google has, in fact, patented enormous adhesive flypaper for human beings for their self-driving cars. That was our Silicon Valley in Real Life segment. But even better than that, we have some amazing news from Phil Svitek himself.
AfterBuzz TV News.
Well, I think the biggest news that we start with is the fact that Barry and Silicon Valley have been renewed for new seasons. In the case of Silicon Valley, it's season 6.
Yay!
Amy Gravitt, who is the vice president of programming over at HBO, said, "While Barry has delighted audiences with its deft interplay of comedy and drama, Silicon Valley remains as brilliantly and frighteningly prescient as ever. We're thrilled that these 2 smart, funny shows are returning for another season."
Both great. Have you seen Barry yet?
I have not.
I have not. It's really good. I'm actually watching it as well. And just so you guys know, we have an after show for Barry as well that airs immediately after this one and on the podcast, so check that out.
Yeah, and Alec Berger
yep.
is also an executive producer on that, so there's a Silicon Valley tie-in
Indeed.
for you there as well. I won't read the full article, but Rolling Stone did a wonderful job of sort of identifying how season 5 is really hitting its stride, especially in this Facebook era. You know, right now Zuckerberg is over at Congress testifying, being questioned, and so forth. And what they're really highlighting is how Silicon Valley, the show, is becoming a lot darker because of everything happening in the world. And as such, whether the writers could have predicted this or not, they're saying this is really Guilfoyle's season because he's always represented that dark side of this world, and especially with his neuroses over who's listening, who's not, and so forth, and he's able to sort of combat that, whereas everyone else is a little bit happy-go-lucky about it.
Yeah, I think the article really sharply identified how privacy is the huge issue in tech right now, and yeah, the show is on top of it as it's ever been. So Thanks for finding that article, Phil. For those who want to find that article as well, it's in Rolling Stone, and it is called...
It's called Silicon Valley, Welcome to the Tech Industry's Heart of Darkness. Definitely check that out.
It's a good read.
Just on a second note, on their main ticker, they also have some cannabis news.
Oh, nice.
Nothing to do with anything, just thought I'd tell you.
Has to do with Erlich, but even more than that,
yes,
been a
indeed.
big week for T.J. Miller.
It was. So this news broke this past Monday evening after we had finished up our show. As far as the actual incident, it dates back to March 18th, so it didn't get out until recently. But Miller allegedly dialed 911 and told dispatchers that he was on an Amtrak train from Washington, D.C. to New York, and that a female passenger had a bomb in her bag. Now, when questioned for a second time, he got all the initial details wrong. He switched up his story. And in fact, there was no bomb found on the Amtrak train. We don't have more information than that, apart from the fact that... what did they call them? The train attendants themselves noted how he had been inebriated going onto the train and just continued drinking from there. So, was this a prank? Was this not? Who knows? As of right now, he could face up to 5 years in prison, although very, very early speculation as to what's going to happen, so I don't have more information beyond that. Again, the actual incident was back in March 18th.
This is kind of wild. I mean, it's interesting. I feel like since the beginning of this year, we've sort of seen this, I don't know, interesting kind of public display of instability from TJ Miller. And this only continues that trend.
Yeah, not a lot of saving grace. I mean, it's one of those things where, you see celebrity couples break up and it ends up being okay, it's just mutual and it's fine and it's good. We remain friends, yada, yada, yada. This just never ended correctly. And he's in the lore of Silicon Valley. And while the show continues to work without him, his career has just been imploding.
A little bit, yeah. Let us know what you guys think in the comments. Obviously, it was big news to break, especially around TJ Miller. And obviously, if you guys have been following the news, you also know there's been some Me Too stuff surrounding his past as well. So, yeah, it has not been a great year for him since he left the show. Let us know what you guys think. And, of course, remember, you can connect with us on Twitter. With that, though, I say we get into our final segment of this after show, which is, of course, your predictions.
And now, your AfterBuzz TV predictions.
I'll let you start, Phil.
Well, the thing that ties in mostly to this episode was the fact that Hoover tells Gavin that I didn't realize they were this far along. Mm-hmm. And so that's why when I look at why Gavin was in this episode, though he didn't have a lot to do, I think it's just kind of reminding us that the mole and so forth. I'm worried for Jeff simply because of that fact. He is an original stallion. So, I'm hoping everything goes okay with him. As far as everything else, we'll see. I'm looking forward to more of Bighead's involvement.
Yes.
And to see how things play out there, especially with the new internet in China.
Yes, I want to echo everything you're saying. I will say I would love at least one subplot, even if it's a B story this season, positioned around Raviga, just because I think that's awesome.
It's not Raviga, it's Bream Hall.
Bream Hall, I'm so sorry. Look at me. But yeah, I think that VC stuff specifically can be very funny. So, they'll pull in Lori Bream just for moments, but I would like maybe one specific subplot given to her this season, just because I think she is consistently, reliably funny. I'm also looking forward to whenever this presentation happens. I don't know when in the season it's going to fall, but I expect it to be reliably cringy and hilarious. So those are my predictions. You kind of never know.
You don't appreciate the SSD and the ECCs and the...
That was funny. As always, that was funny. Well, guys, this has been your Silicon Valley After Show here on AfterBuzz TV. Today we covered Season 5, Episode 4, Tech Evangelist, and we had a lot of thoughts. I'll say it one more time. Let us know what you think. Phil, where can them people find you on the internets?
You can check me out at Phil Svitek on social media platforms, and I do have a website, philsvitek.com. So if you're up for it, check it out.
And guys, my name is Jeff. I'm not a mole, but I do host here other shows. Just so you guys know, on Fridays I host a show called The Unproduced Table Read. For those of you fans of good writing, on that show we actually read unproduced scripts with award-winning writers and interview the writers on air. It's really fun, and I think it's educational for those of you guys who like to dissect specific writing components of good scripts. So that's Fridays on our sister network, The Popcorn Talk, at 10 a.m. Of course, guys, we will be here next week on Monday at 4 p.m. to cover Silicon Valley Season 5, Episode 5, and we will see you then. Bye, guys.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.